I'm going to cover a lot of tech tools, and some of them will work for certain age groups or certain populations. And if you have an idea of like, oh wow, I would love to use that in this particular way, I would love it if you'd share it on our Today's Meet back channel. And since we're getting kind of a late start, I might have to tailor this a little bit. And this will be a great space for you guys to have kind of a conversation that's happening beyond what I'm doing. So that if you have a question, you can ask it. Somebody else in the audience can jump in and answer it. And you guys can bounce ideas around in this space. And it's live for a week. So if at any point you're like, oh, I want to go back and grab some of those ideas, you can do that from the Today's Meet channel anytime from now until 7 days from now. So, ooh, look at that. So the way we're communicating is changing, particularly the way young people are communicating is changing. And I like digital writing because I think it really allows us to grab kids where they are and teach them really important skills. So just some of the ways in which the way we communicate is changing. So USPS facing bankruptcy for the 5th year in a row and has had this 22% decrease in the amount of snail mail that it's sent since 2006. And when I was doing my To Kill a Mockingbird unit, and I shared last night a little bit about this, we researched the death penalty because we voted on it in the November elections, and the kids wrote an argument essay, were they pro, were they con death penalty, why? And then they wrote letters to our local representation saying, this is how I feel about this issue, here's why. We really talked about including details and research. And then I had them actually print out, which they don't print out very much for me, print out their letters and bring them in so we could put them in envelopes. They don't know how to address an envelope. They didn't know where their name goes. Like, literally, I had to draw on my board like a picture of their envelope. Most of them kind of knew where the stamp went, which is great, I guess, but they don't know where to address the envelope. So we had to walk through that entire process as a class, and they realized so many kids are not using mail for any other reason. Some of them, maybe they write grandma a card once in a while, but apparently the parents are writing the addresses on them. Then we think about payphones. When I was in high school and my plans changed, man, I had to find a payphone. I had to call my parents. I had to ask if it was okay to stay out later. They were everywhere. And they're decreasing in number because everybody, or most people, or increasing numbers, are carrying cell phones in their pocket. I carried one of these in high school. This is how I knew I had to find one of those payphones if I got a pager or a page from one of my parents. Now, almost everything can be done online, and I thought this was interesting. By 2013, 507 emails will be sent per day. And 15 through 20-year-olds are the second largest email users. Although I think this is changing as well, because when I ask my high school kids at the beginning of the year, I say, how many of you have an email? And a lot of hands shoot up, and they say, okay, keep your hands up. How many of you have an email for anything other than collecting your Facebook notifications? Hands went down, right? So they're not actively using email the way many of us are. And it's funny when I talk to them, they see email as like, it's kind of formal. This is for like big deal. You're emailing people, right? And so their perception of how they communicate is changing. They tend to communicate like this, either on their phones, right, or updating Facebook pages. And I'll never forget having a really interesting conversation with a student who was struggling, and I was like, what's going on for you outside of class? You can't do this, Ben. You're totally capable of this work. He goes, I'm really busy. At the end of this conversation, it is revealed Ben spends approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours on the Facebook every night. I was like, mystery solved. Here's how we can find you some more time. The average teen, 3,000 text messages a month. Girls, more than boys. And I was just in an IEP with a really sweet, very quiet kid and his dad last week, in which the dad told me Alex had sent, last month alone, 14,000 text messages. But that's okay because it's unlimited, the cost. Unbelievable. I mean, 14,000, I can't even imagine. What does that break down to per day? Math's not really my thing. So, what I wanted to do is to use Socrative, which I love. Oh, I'm just bouncing around. I'm kind of scared to make my computer do anything else because it was so uncooperative with me. I love Socrative. How many people have heard of or used Socrative? Okay. So if you want to hop on, I am going to launch this and I can tell you what the percentages are. I love using this in class. So let's say I want to do a really impromptu poll of my students or question. I can write this on the board. I could project this. And all I've done from my Socrative app on my phone, which is free, although only 50 of you are going to be able to get in if there's more than 50 of you in here. Basically, I could be showing you in real time, if my computer wasn't being kind of cranky, exactly how many people said A versus B, C, and I didn't have to pre-enter anything. So right now we got one person that has said email is the way that they communicate the most, and I know that there's 11 people in my virtual room, and what I love to do is I use this for reading quizzes, I use it for fun, just review games, and I can walk around and see the live results and give students in that moment feedback on what they just did. It's pretty incredible. The student app is free too. We use it so much that most of my students have the app on their phone if they have a smartphone. Email still has the most. Text messages are coming in a close second. And face-to-face, actually, is right behind text messages. So that's kind of interesting. And so I have this little graph. It would be awesome if this little graph was a really big graph so you could see it. But it's super fun for me to be able to quickly assess kind of where my students are at and what they think about a topic. And you can have it do a multiple choice impromptu, an impromptu short answer. So at the end of a class, if you're like, I just want to see if these kids really get this concept, you can ask them just an open-ended short answer question, collect all their responses, export it to your email, done. I love that about Socrative. So 75% of four-year colleges, and I'm getting just a flood, or the last few months I've just gotten a flood of college recommendation requests. Like Ms. Tucker, in fact, this morning I was just finishing one for a student who asked me on Tuesday, because I don't have anything else going on, right? If I could do his recommendation, and the whole thing is online. So these kids really do need to be able to navigate the online space for writing, for opportunities, and an increasing number of students are taking at least one class online. And when you're online, clearly all of the writing is going to be digital writing. So they have to learn the techniques. They need to know how to engage with each other in the online space. And I just read an article in the San Francisco Chronicle that 10 to 15% of the UC offerings will be online courses to supplement, or classes to supplement their existing offerings to deal with the budget crunch. So students have to be able to navigate the online space, write emails to professors, engage in online discussions. All of that's going to be increasingly important. And I love this quote, and I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it because I know you can read. Just give you a second. And I really do think we're in a moment, it's a game changer. And for some people that's really scary, and for some people it's really exciting. And we as teachers can decide, what does digital writing look like in our class? And digital writing, you know, the digital piece means maybe it's not just about words anymore. How can we get students thinking about images and complementing them? So some of the tools I'm going to talk about, which I hope you'll brainstorm ideas for, is really about getting students to engage in the online space, writing, using media really strategically. Because digital writing, it's not just about words. It really engages students' critical thinking, right? If they're working in the online space, a lot of times there's a wider audience, and so they're more invested in making sure that what they're pushing out is really high quality. And I talked a little bit last night about how the definition of literacy is kind of changing, and to think about what digital writing means in terms of literacy, and the importance of capturing an audience and keeping that audience. So now, if you already were on Socrative, and just to give you a total before we start this one, 21 people said that they actually communicate more via email. 17 people said that they communicate more via C, which is, wait for it, text messages. 3 people talk on the phone most, And 12 people said face-to-face communication, while 3 people said Twitter, Facebook, social media was really how they were communicating. So an interesting breakdown. So I'm going to launch another just impromptu short answer where I'm going to ask you, if you're already in the room, great, how would you define 21st century literacy? Because really the standards, the goal of the Common Core standards is to define what does it mean to be a literate person in the 21st century. So thinking about what was literacy, how did we used to define that, how would you define that now? And if I could project Socrative, you would see all of the different ideas that people, all the different definitions that they were sharing. So I'm kind of tempted while you do this to see if I can get my browser to... Yeah, if you go to m.socrative.com, and then it'll ask you for a room number, and it's 44701. And once you start an account as a teacher, you always have the same room number. You can pre-enter quizzes and test students that way, and it saves all of your things. If you're working with other teachers and you're both doing a unit on, cells and cell division, and you create some kind of a quiz, you can easily share those so you can both use them. So it's kind of a fun tool for teachers. So maybe I'll read you some of the responses so we don't slow this down. So being able to effectively communicate using different sources. Clearly understanding and demonstrating the 4 C's. Knowing the specific strategies needed to read, write, and communicate. And it's just updates in real time as they get posted. 21st century literacy is about being fluent at finding information, analyzing that information, discussing it, using images. It's about adaptability. So fun to be able to see the variety of responses coming in. And again, if you want to create a question that you want to end your class on, you can capture all of that. And like I said, time is our biggest commodity. It's the best thing. We need more of it, but we don't have enough. And so the more we can capture and then reflect on later, the better. So I want to talk about digital communication in a couple of different contexts. I want to speak specifically to how we can use it to communicate and to teach students how to communicate more effectively, to foster collaboration, encourage reflection, and I'm so bad at this. I get so busy, and I know a lot of students do too, where reflection is kind of the first thing I toss aside if I don't have time. I'm like, oh, I'll get to that later. So figuring out how we can build in opportunities for students to reflect on what they're learning, what they're struggling with. Because in those moments of quiet reflection, they're going to learn a lot about themselves and probably be able to identify where they need to put their energy. And then publish and creation. And because we have, we're so connected to each other, this idea that we can get students publishing and creating their own information and pushing it out to a larger audience is really exciting and definitely an incentive for them to put more time and energy into the work that they're doing. So I spoke a little bit yesterday about my belief in the power of discussion and my goal to really kind of push students from a very passive role where they're consuming information to a really active role. And if you're engaged in a discussion, you are in an active learning role. You're asking questions, you're making connections, you're building on ideas shared, you're thinking critically about what other people have said, you have to evaluate what other people have said, you have to articulate your own response. And so, as I said, I've used Collaborized Classroom. You could get discussions done with a variety of different platforms, and if you're in love with an LMS that has a discussion functionality, that's wonderful too. Just figuring out how to foster student communication is really, really important. And online discussions create a very fun, social way to get that done to replace kind of some of the more traditional pen and paper homework assignments. So I kind of just skipped right back by this slide. I think it's important to really hit these 3 things when we talk about students and online discussion. How do we teach them to respectfully, supportively, and substantively engage with each other? Those are things that they really struggle with. They get online and they're not really sure what to say. If you've posted a question, they respond to your question, but do they know how to engage with each other? So I'm hoping this is a screencast, and I'm just going to talk you through what you're seeing. So I always start the beginning of our work in the online space with online icebreakers. I love the idea of icebreakers, but in the classroom, they take up a lot of time, they're kind of loud and crazy, so I thought, I'm going to post icebreakers online for my students so they can get to know each other. So I posted this, we started school right as the Olympics were wrapping up this year, and I asked them, okay, if you were going to participate in the Summer Olympics, which one of these different sports would you be engaged in? And why? Like, which one would you probably want to participate in? And I used a multiple choice question structure. You can see I Googled all of the summer sports and tried to put them up there. They articulate their post in that box, press submit, and then what you're going to see as they go down is their answers are kind of shallow. They're real short, and it's an icebreaker, so they don't have to get too crazy. But we really go through in these beginning stages. And all of the indents, you'll see, those are replies from peers, and there aren't very many of them. They don't start with each other's names. They're not very long. You tend to get a lot of like, oh, good job, great point, that's cool, okay? So figuring out how do we support them in expanding. So we did a whole communications unit, and I had them watch Sherry Turkle's TED Talk, Connected but Alone. I used a yes or no question structure, and I asked them to think about her idea of, she says that we're a generation of I share, therefore I am. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? And we had talked about the do's and don'ts of online communication. I'd given them some strategies for saying something substantial. Now all of a sudden, look at their responses not only to my question, but do you see these paragraphs of replies? They're starting with each other's names. They're pulling out pieces from the post that they like, that they want to comment on. Some of them are ending with a question to encourage other people to actively engage in the online discussion space, because now they know how. Before, they didn't know how. They weren't used to having an academic conversation. It was a super new skill for them. And so you see how they begin to really own the online space. The third tab you're going to see in the last one is really, it's a voter suggest, where students can vote for the answer that they like the best. So again, validating and allowing students to get involved. I'm doing Romeo and Juliet right now, so this is just from the end of last week, where they have to pair a song with every scene from Shakespeare's play, and they have to analyze the song and why they chose it. And you'll see all of these responses that the student got at the very top. Really, really validating, and it was a super fun way to kind of depart from the normal analysis kind of questions and have them really have a good time with Shakespeare. So I was subtly teaching them how to cite specific examples, because they had to connect the song to the play. They had to analyze what themes or, ideas in the song connected with that scene in the play. And look at all these replies. Clearly, they love it. They love the social nature of online discussions. And my hope, fingers crossed, is that some of this respectful, okay, starting with someone's name, really pulling out details, some of this will surface in those interactions that they have on Facebook, in their social interactions, where they become a little bit more cognizant of the power of their words. They're so busy rapid firing off these, text messages and updating their Facebook pages. Do they really think about what the person's face looks like who's receiving those messages? Are they aware of how powerful their words are? And the way they communicate is it's increasingly informal, it's succinct, and it's increasingly digital. And I have students who will stay in my room at lunch, and I know it's a little collection of friends who will hang out, and they're all on their phones together. They're not actually talking hardly about anything. They're clearly texting people who are not right there with them. So it's this huge culture shift in the way that they communicate. Because their communication is so succinct, figuring out how to leverage that for education and teach them how to do that better, there is value in teaching them how to communicate in 140 characters or less. The first day of class they walked in, I said, okay, text me, and I put my Google Voice number on the board, and they were like, whoa. What is happening? Our teacher just gave us her phone number. And then I explained, this isn't my real phone number. This is my Google Voice, and I can capture your feedback or your messages and your texts. And I said, in 140 characters or less, tell me what you're passionate about. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, and I said, if you don't have a cell phone, person next to you, when they're done, you can do it. And they were so engaged. And so today's meet, what you guys are, some of you hopefully using right now to communicate and collaborate, I did an entire blog post here about ideas for how to use that. Maybe you're showing a documentary and you don't want kids to like just kind of tune out. You want them to engage. You could project a back channel and ask them to highlight the key points that they're seeing in the video or the documentary. Ask questions. I use it all the time when I start a new routine. So when I first did my first TED Ed lesson, I was not sure how this was going to go. And you know what I didn't want? I did not want 170 emails like, oh, Ms. Tucker, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. So I set up a today's meet back channel, and on the homework I said you're going to complete this TED Ed lesson. I hyperlinked to the lesson. The lesson totally is laid out for them. I said if you hit a bump, you have a question, you need support, go to this back channel link. And I invite you to support each other. So all of a sudden, and there was a lot of activity on the back channel link because some of their browsers were outdated, some people weren't sure whether they had to register, and I wasn't the one answering 90% of those questions. I did check in, I did try to help when I could, but all of a sudden I funneled all of their energy into the back channel where they could really support each other. And why I say I see value is I'm on Twitter and I love it. I meet so many incredible people on Twitter, but I am an English teacher and 140 characters, like, are you kidding me? I was like, I have so many ideas and not enough characters, right? I still struggle with it to this day. In fact, there's a gentleman who leads the Ed chats, and he sent me a message, and he told me, he goes, I love your ideas. I love them, but they're just too long. I can't retweet you. And I was like, okay, so this is something I need to work on. And I'm still working on Twitter. Like, I make mistakes all the time, and people are always like, Catlin, you just did this. And I'm like, oh, good to know. So again, maybe you don't want to go into the Twitter sphere with your kids, but I think there's a lot of value in that as well. So, collaboration. So, by design, pen and paper composition, what most of us think of as writing, it's a one-person deal. So how do we, with digital writing, get multiple people collaborating together using different tools? And so like I said, I said at my keynote last night, I'm going to show you a bunch of tools. If you walk away excited about one, success. Okay? Do not feel like you need to, like, whoa, this woman is too much. There's too many tools. As I said last night, I know a lot of us struggle with that idea of having so many destinations. So if you're like, ooh, I love this, I could use it for that, add it to the back channel, take note of that tool, and great. If you already know some of them, grab a new one, add it to your tool belt. So collaboration, and I touched on this a little last night, is for me, really using Google Docs has been transformative in collaborating with them and supporting them in their writing. I like to create a Google document that has, like when we're doing argument writing, it'll have a pro and a con, and it'll have an issue at the top, and I'll say, okay, as we go through this, research, I want you to collect your information in the pro and con, and then I can come in, I can give them feedback, and then when we're doing big writing assignments, and this is a different screencast than I showed last night with a different group of students, but again, working on the Joy Luck Club essay, all of a sudden going into the computer lab and having all of their tabs open, right? All of their essays open, and being able to go through and write them instant messages on the side here, go in and make edits, usually just use a different color, but when they're on the document, they can see it at the same time. And it's so great to not only be able to go through and touch their document, show them what's missing, add something, put a comment in the sidebar, talk with them in real time. And there's somewhere it was so great. It was like I was making notes in one part of the document, and then I would see their little colorful flicker kind of cursor jump up where I had made a comment and just fix whatever had been done, and then jump back down to what they were doing before. And so for me, I'm able to really give them that individual feedback that they need as writers to be successful. And I'm not sure how other teachers organize this, but with 170 kids, that's a lot of docs that get shared with me. And so what I do in my email, just as kind of a practical how-to, and this may not be the best strategy, but I'm going to share it because it's the one that's working for me, is I create a file, like is it a file in my email? A A label. It's a label. I use a label. So I create a label for each of my classes, and then I create a label for each of the assignments that they're sharing for me, and then I just nestle each label underneath the class, and then when they share stuff, I do not download every document. I just put it right into the label, and then I have all of the Joy Luck Club essays together, all of the pro-con, death penalty debate docs together, and I can access them whenever I want. I can open them all, and I can do all this stuff that you're seeing up here, and it's so easy to give them quality feedback, check in and out throughout the process. I also like Linoit, and Linoit is great. I know that Wallwisher just went through a transformation. I just got an email. They're a new, does anybody know? Padlet. So maybe worth checking out. I kind of steered away from Wallwisher because the backgrounds were they hurt my eyes. It was not pretty. It was like Technicolor. And so I found Linoit, and I love Linoit because it's a multimedia Post-it board. So I can create a Post-it board, and I can have students just give them the URL, and I can have them posting ideas, brainstorming, inquiry, collaboration on a variety of different topics. And this is great for elementary, where it's not a daunting writing task. And then they can kind of see what everybody else's ideas are. But it's also really great for high school. This was just the beginning of a Linoit, or the one aspect of a Linoit board that I did with my high school students a couple years ago, where we were doing a genocide research paper. We were studying the Holocaust. I wanted them to write a paper, but I really wanted them to focus on what are actual genocides beyond the Holocaust that have happened? Let's brainstorm so that I don't get 100 and whatever research papers on one single event, but a variety of events. And so I had students go on to a Linoit board. I created one. I make it public usually because we use it in real time in the computer lab or for a homework assignment. They'll post their thoughts on the Linoit, and then we're able to collaborate and generate a lot of ideas at once, and it's really, really easy. And if my computer was working really well, or I was confident that it was, I would have you guys sharing your ideas here. How could you use this with your students? What would they brainstorm? How could you drive inquiry? How could you get all of their ideas in one place at one time? And so, super simple tool. So, reflection. Like I said before, I am definitely guilty of not taking the time to reflect. In my own practice, I think blogging has been where I really stop and I think about what I'm doing in my teaching and what's working and what was the process that I went through and what might I like to change and create next time or how to improve it. And so, for me, that's worked. But how do we get students to think about where they're at, where they've been, where they're going? And I'll let you read that quote. And I love the connection between reflection and action, right? If my goal is to get them into a really active role as producers, then reflection really needs to be part of that cycle that gets them there. And so Penzu, if anybody's looking for a journaling tool, it is fabulous. And what I like about it is every student, if you have a small group of students, every student could create their own free Penzu account. I would probably collect their URLs in a Google form just to keep it all organized. Or you could go to the educator version, is pretty affordable, and then it has teacher features where you can pre-populate their journals with entries and assignments, but they can share them quite easily with you. They can also lock journal entries. So if what we're trying to do is get students to really reflect in life, then hopefully they start using this tool for reflecting more than just the tasks you're giving them in your classroom. They can also insert media, which makes it a little bit more dynamic, images and pictures. Next year when I do Night, which is my unit where we really delve into the Holocaust, I do a journaling activity where students grab an identity, from the Holocaust, from the scenario, are they a prisoner, are they, in the what are they? And then they write journal entries from that perspective. And how cool if I can pair people up online to share their journal entries from that point of view. You could even have students doing narrative writing in the journal entry form using a really simple tool like that, where they share it with you, where they insert pictures from their own life or what's happening for them. I don't have my own students blogging. I haven't figured out a really great way to keep track of 170 blogs. For me, that just feels a little too much. It's a little too much. But if you have particularly younger students and you want to get them writing in a really informal way, upper elementary, middle school, O-Life is a really simple one. And if they have an email, they can literally set it so that once a week, every day, whatever frequency they want, they get a little message that says, how's your day? Or an email, how's your day going? And they just type it in and it goes to their blog. And it's this kind of compilation of entries. And so it makes, I use a WordPress for my own blog, but there's a lot that you have to learn about WordPress to really be successful. So thinking about really simple blogging tools and how we can use it. And then probably the most exciting thing about digital writing is getting those ideas out there, sharing them by publishing. And I'll never forget, I might have been in this room actually, and Rushton Hurley, who is amazing, was giving a talk, and he said, when students know that they're writing something for their teacher, they want it to be good enough. But if they know that their peers or a wider audience is going to see what they're writing, they want it to be good. So all of a sudden there's a reason to spend more time on their writing and their work. And in the Common Core, there's definitely an emphasis on not only do students need to be doing argument, informational, and then for us English teachers, narrative writing. They have to be able to clearly communicate their ideas in writing. They need to be able to communicate, collaborate, publish using tools, including online tools and the internet. And then they really have to be aware of their audience, their tone, audience, purpose, so that they can be successful. And so that is something that you can also teach when you're using online tools to publish. Okay, what's the task? What should your tone be? What's the audience? I know a lot of teachers working with younger kids love Storyboard. So this idea that you can basically use artwork that's already there to create a story. And sometimes that visual component is really, really great for kids as the spark, to really get them thinking about the parts of their story. I really like Story Jumper, and my husband, who teaches mostly AP World. He also teaches one class of Avid. He had his Avid students use Story Jumper. And what's kind of cool about Story Jumper, and I just did a little demo, is students can use pictures from their own lives and upload them. There's also different props they can use in the sidebar. They can drag over these little images, which some of them are kind of cartoon-like, so might be more appropriate for younger kids. But if we're thinking about narrative writing, writing that focuses on real or imagined events, and we're getting students to either tell an imaginary story or tell their own story, wouldn't it be cool to be able to teach them to do that with images from their own life? And their lives they all come in with this background, all of these experiences. How do we capitalize on that? And it's a really easy interface to use. And I even uploaded a picture, so if they have pictures on their desktop, they can grab those. You can also access Flickr and grab, photos that they can use with Creative Commons. And then there's a great conversation to have about how you can grab images and what images are okay to use. And then last night I talked about the infographic. And I will say that this idea of rethinking what research needs to look like. As an English teacher, will probably always teach the research paper, but I do love the idea of figuring out how to strategically display research in other ways. And there was definitely writing on the infographics, and actually most of my students, my biggest critique was, there's kind of too much writing on your infographic. You want to use the images to really communicate a point. And so that was really hard for them. But in that, the struggle is a lot of value. And so I had students researching. They were playing with Pictochart. And as they were working on it, I had them fill out this Got Credibility form. So I created a Google form. And whenever I create a form where I'm collecting information, I grab their name, I grab their email. And then I had them walk through, for one resource, this entire process. Does does this website have an author? Is the author credentialed in this field? What is their experience that allows them to speak to this topic with authority? Are they associated with a company or some kind of an organization that might impact the quality of the information or create a bias? Is that bias important? And really getting them to start training their brains to look for the details and think about, well, if I can't find an author, if I don't know when this was last updated, should I be using this? Or even cross-referencing information. So at the end, I even linked them to the OWL Purdue site and had them work on an MLA citation for it. What's hilarious is most kids, by the time they got to this piece, were like, yeah, I don't think I can use this one. This doesn't have a lot of that stuff. Okay. And they were kind of exasperated with me, like, do we have to do this again with like another one? I'm like, mentally, you should do this with every single piece of research that you do. Like if you're really digging into a piece of research. And then they were, like I said, they were able to create these incredible infographics, and some of them were stronger than others, and some had a ton of writing, and some needed to, I had to walk them through, okay, well, it's on the infographic, but they still had to have a works cited. This one got cut off at the bottom a little bit. So that you're giving credit to where you found all of these fantastic ideas. And then at the end of this year, I'm so excited. In the past, I have always had the end of the year like project be a writer's workshop portfolio. And they all have to have a binder, a creative cover, they include certain pieces of information, different kinds of writing, and they have to polish, edit, and revise. And the whole idea is that they can really see their growth over time. This year, they're doing it, but they're doing it online. They're going to create an online portfolio. They're going to share things like their infographics, their multimedia timelines, their argument essays, their business letters, and create this kind of very visual, accessible, shareable site where they can be really proud, hopefully, of what they've created this year. Weebly is a really easy site to use for creating a website. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it with Google Sites since they all have a Gmail, although Google Sites definitely has more of a learning curve than Weebly. So we're going to have to spend some time in the computer lab just so I can walk them through it. So I talked a little bit about sustainability last night, and all of these ideas sound so great. And then you take a step back and you're like, good Lord, how am I going to like assess all this? How am I going to stay on top of it? And really what I was hoping to use my computer for, and I think I'm going to try it before you go, is to show you. So during the Joy Luck Club unit, the biggest thing students struggle with, and this could be true for history and historical figures too, is really the characters. So Joy Luck Club has 8 primary characters, and they all tell 2 stories. That's a lot of characters, a lot of secondary characters. So I had them create a Facebook page for their character, and they were in character groups. So throughout the whole unit, they were kind of focused on this character. They read every story, but they were thinking about how the other characters related to their character, so they could become the expert on their characters. And then as a group, they had to collaboratively create a Facebook page for their character. And every other character had to comment on their Facebook page. And I told them, I said, you really need to think about like the relationship. So if you're June and you've got a Facebook page for June, think about what would Waverly say. Waverly's kind of snarky. What would she leave on June's page? They've always had this rivalry. Think outside the box. And so all of a sudden, students had to think really critically about it. So I created this form, a Google form, and Google Forms just got like a really fun facelift. Loving it. And then I combined it with a script called Form Emailer. And if you use Google Forms, if you like spreadsheets, you got to find out about the Form Emailer. And I actually have a blog post on my blog, a few blogs back, that has a screencast and an explanation for how to get this done. So basically, what students did is they shared their Facebook pages with me, and then I went through and I assessed them, and these are all areas of assessment as I scroll down the Facebook project, and I would click, and I try to keep my responses like statements, actual sentences, as opposed to you got a 1 out of 4, you got a 3 out of 4, and then on the back end, when I collect all of that in the spreadsheet, I am able to, from the spreadsheet, shoot every kid with the Form Emailer script an individual email on his or her participation on this assignment. Straight from the email, click of one button really, and they get this personalized email where it looks like Ms. Tucker wrote every single student an individual email about all of the parts of their assignment. So, you know, we're teaching in a digital world, and I can't say that without wanting to be like, we're living, you know. And I'm a digital teacher. I'm a digital teacher. And we need to think about some things. There are things that make teaching in a digital world different from the way teaching used to be. And so you don't need to grade everything. People are always like, how do you grade all those online discussions? It's like a lot of work. I have a report page. It tells me how many times in a given window each kid logged on, posted a response, replied to peers. I read through them so I can see if somebody, you know, if Simone's not really, you know, amping up her responses, I email her. I'm like, hey, Simone, you're underdeveloped, your responses are underdeveloped, here's some strategies. If that doesn't work, step 2. Hey, Simone, let's talk after class, I'm concerned. And then I start just taking off. I use participation credit for their online discussion performance, and I'll just take off some points if it's consistently underdeveloped. But I've always had the email, I've always had the conversation first, and I don't go through and assign everything an A or a B or a C. Students are incredibly valuable resources. Why not create a Google form and ask students to review a peer's writing? I have often had students share, I'll share a document with another student. Sometimes I pair my academic students with honors students. Sometimes I'll pair honors with honors and academic with academic. I like having the formal Google form just because, you know, peer editing can be like the blind leading the blind around. So the more we can structure, hey, you're looking for this piece. You're looking for that. How did they do? What was the most memorable aspect of this? Then all of a sudden they have a way to be successful, and you on your end can see all of the feedback, and you know, it just makes it easier to give that formative assessment and feedback going through if you can tap into your students' resources. I believe that more writing leads to better writing. The more we can get them writing, the better. And when they're communicating in the digital space, half of the time, I don't think they really see it as writing. They feel like they're having conversations. I took a poll of students. I said, do our online discussions feel more like writing or talking? 75% of students, that was the overall average, talking, not writing. So how fun for them, or how fun for me, that they feel like in this moment they're having conversations, yet all the while they're working on their writing. And I'm pulling in anonymous examples into class, they critique them, they make them better. And that I think grades sometimes aren't the most motivating factor. If students can see that the work they're doing online guides what happens in the classroom, if students are going to be sharing their work with a larger audience, sometimes those are more motivating elements. And then the technology can be used to create so much visibility and really accountability, because I know even with more numbers than I've ever had before, I have a better sense of what every kid is doing and where they're at, because I can constantly go in and check on their work and their writing. So for me, that's a real plus. So I was going to end with this, but I think I'm going to try to show you the live demo. So you're welcome. Like I said, I have a blog about tons of writing stuff, about the form emailer. I kind of want to show you what that looks like, but if you need to head out, that's fine too. I just want you to see how fun this can be as an English teacher. And there may be some student info in this, so I'd love to not capture that if you want to stop the recording. So I'm going to log into my Gmail account if Chrome does not freeze on me. Come on. Oh, all right. So this is my school account, and I'll show you the labels and how I organize all of the stuff on the sidebar here. So down here you'll see, all of my classes and all of the different, and the one next to it just means the second semester because I wanted them to rise to the top. And I have all of the different assignments they've already done right here. Then on the back end are my spreadsheets, so open up my drive, and I'm just going to go ahead and take, oh, here it is. So I have the Joy Luck Club responses. This is what I see on my end after they fill out that really pretty form that looked like this. So then once I have that on my form, I have this form emailer installed. And most of these kids turned it in on time. So you see they all had their email sent on this side about how they did. I'll get to one that I don't have. So here we have Monica, who turned hers in late. And you can see all of the different parts of, oh, this one's Matthew. Monica also did not turn hers in on time. So then there's missing components. I have a comment section. I have a grade section. So she actually gets 17 for my conversion. So all I have to do is go up to Form Emailer, Process Manually, line 87. Now Monica, and I always see myself, so now Monica has gotten an email that looks, or Matthew, sorry, has gotten an email that looks like this. And that's all I've had to do. So as a teacher, it's about figuring out how to do things maybe in just a different way to make ourselves more effective. And then, to be honest, I'm learning just like all of you. I wrote my whole blog on the form emailer, and then someone wrote a really nice response, and they were like, "Have you checked out Doctopus?" And I was like, no, what is this? And now I'm like diving into that. So, you know, one step at a time, having fun with it, but making sure that it's really just a sustainable part of your practice. Have a wonderful rest of your time at CUE. Thank you. Sorry about the late start.